How's it, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be talking about 3 of the gun control bills that were pre-filed prior to Joe Biden actually getting sworn in. Now we have the text of 3 more of these bills. So let's talk about these. Let's break these down and let's see what exactly this new Democratic Congress is proposing as far as infringements on our Second Amendment rights. But real quick, before we jump into this video, I want to thank one of the main sponsors of the channel, that being Thorson Customs. Thorson Customs does a lot to support us here on this channel and also help support us here in the state of California. They offer California compliant parts and features that you can use in your AR-15 style build. So if you're interested in taking a look at them, I'll put a link to them down in the detail section. So let's get right into these 3 bills that we now have the text for, and these are pretty much just anti-gun, gun control bills. The bills we're going to be talking about in this video are H.R.121, H.R.125, and H.R.130. If you haven't seen my most recent video, I talked about the text in H.R.127. That is a comprehensive attack on our Second Amendment rights. It has a ton of horrible things in that bill as well. And you click this tab right there and it'll take you to that video. So H.R.125, what does this bill actually intend to do? Well, first, this bill's name is the Gun Safety Not Sorry Act of 2021. So whatever that means, that is what they're trying to title this bill to be. But what it attempts to do is it attempts to require a background check, not just for firearms purchases, but also on every single purchase of an armor-piercing ammunition type, as well as large capacity magazine or silencers. So it's requiring background checks for all of those things. And then what it also attempts to do is it wants to put a 7-day waiting period on all of those items as well. And it does this by adding in new language to the existing 18 U.S.C. section 922. And I'll put a link to this bill and all the relevant stuff down in the detail section if you want to take a look at it for yourself. But it inserts language because currently the only language in there talks about firearms and needing a background check for firearms. And so what this does is it wants to insert new language, adding onto that, saying all purchases or transfers of firearms, as well as armor-piercing ammunition, as well as large capacity magazines, and as well as firearms, you're going to need a background check. And then on top of that, there's also going to be a 7-day waiting period for you to take possession of the items. Now, what I'm assuming they're going to do with silencers is you're still going to have to do the typical federal requirements with the ATF. And then on top of that, if you get through all that long month waiting period, you pay all your fees, all that stuff, then you're gonna have to tack on an additional 7-day waiting period to take possession of it. I guess they're thinking that it will chill you after all this long process from still wanting that by tacking on an additional 7 days. But I guess that's what they're attempting to do. What's really important for this bill is the actual prohibition section that they're adding into here. So I'll read it for you. It talks about prohibition. It's the section 922, and they're going to add subsection AA. It says, it shall be unlawful for a person who is not a licensed importer, licensed manufacturer, or licensed dealer in or affecting interstate or foreign commerce to transfer to another person not so licensed a semi-automatic firearm, a silencer, armor-piercing ammunition, or a large capacity ammunition magazine, unless at least 7 business days, meaning a day on which the state offices are open, have elapsed since the transferees most recently offered or agreed to acquire the semi-automatic firearm, silencer, ammunition, or magazine, as the case may be, from the transferers. And also I want to mention the definitions of what they add in here for semi-automatic firearms. They say the term semi-automatic firearm means any repeating firearm which utilizes a portion of the energy of a firing cartridge to extract the fire cartridge case and chamber the next round, and which requires a separate pull of the trigger to fire each cartridge. So pretty standard. Important here is also they are not targeting just semi-automatic centerfire rifles. They are targeting all semi-automatic firearms. So that's what would fall under the issue here in this bill. Also, what's important is they have a term large capacity magazine, and they define that to mean a magazine, belt, drum, feed strip, or similar device that has the capacity of, or that can be readily restored or converted to accept more than 10 rounds of ammunition. Pretty standard language as well, which we see in the state of California as well. And also what we saw in H.R.127, which I talked about in the last video, where they are going to attempt to ban, actually in that bill, large capacity magazines or magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. Here they also have a definition of these types of magazines as well. Here, they're going to try to require a background check and 7-day waiting period for them. Not an outright ban, but still a very significant infringement on our Second Amendment rights, because that would mean across the U.S., you would pretty much fall under the same things that California has right now, where you can't just simply order a magazine more than 10 rounds directly to your door. You would pretty much, at least at a federal level, have to go through some sort of FFL dealer, some sort of licensed dealer to run the background check, to run the 7-day waiting period. Here in California, we just have an outright ban on magazines more than 10 rounds with some caveats. But at least at a federal level, what this bill attempts to do is require all these other individuals in other states to have to go through a licensed dealer to take possession of those types of magazines. So H.R.125, it's atrocious. It's just as bad as some of these other bills that we've seen proposed. This one specifically targeting and requiring background checks and 7-day waiting periods for all types of items, all transfers of firearms, armor-piercing ammunition, large capacity magazines, as well as silencers. So that's what H.R.125 seeks to do. Now let's talk about H.R.130, which is another significant bill, and this one targets specifically storage requirements. So H.R.130 is known as the Kimbler-Vaughn Firearms Safe Storage Act. And what this seeks to do is make it unlawful for someone to store a firearm in a specific type of way, and places requirements on the way in which you have to store your firearms and ammunition. So when you look at subsection AA, what it says is it shall be unlawful for a person to store or keep any firearm or ammunition that has moved in or that has otherwise affected interstate or foreign commerce on the premises of a residence under the control of the person, if the person knows or reasonably should know that an individual who has not attained 18 years of age is likely to gain access to the firearm or ammunition without the permission of the parent or guardian of the individual, or an individual who resides at the residence is ineligible to possess a firearm under federal, state, or local law. So essentially what this is saying is that they're going to say that it is unlawful for you to store firearms and ammunition in your home in which you have control if you have a reasonable belief or reasonable expectation that someone who is either a prohibited individual or someone who is a child under the age of 18 could access that firearm or ammunition. Now, there's a caveat to that, and that is where the safe storage requirements of this bill come in. They say you can store firearms and ammunition in your residence if you meet these requirements. And what it says is that that section shall not apply to a person with respect to a firearm or ammunition for the firearm if the person keeps the firearm and ammunition, 1, secured, unloaded, and separately in a safe certified by the Attorney General and locked with a trigger lock certified by the Attorney General, or if the person stores the firearm off the premises at a storage facility, a gun range certified by the Attorney General. So what they're saying is you can have firearms and ammunition stored in your home, but you have to do it in this way or else you're going to violate federal law. They have to be stored separately, unloaded, in a safe specifically said by the Attorney General to be an appropriate type of safe. And they talked about that later in this section where they say the Attorney General is actually going to have a list of certified safes and locks and things like that that they're going to have to, I guess, put out there to let people know what types of safes they can actually use. But it's going to have to be in that safe, stored separately, unloaded, and then you're also going to have a trigger lock, which is certified by the Attorney General on those firearms as well, which essentially makes it, even though you can have firearms stored in your home, they're going to be inoperable for self-defense because you're going to have to store them separately, have trigger locks on them and all that stuff. And so pretty much you can't really use firearms in your home for self-defense if this bill were to pass. This bill essentially would make you a defenseless person in your home because if you didn't store the firearm in this way, technically you'd be violating the federal laws, especially if someone who is a prohibited individual got their hands on your firearm, or if a child got their hands on your firearm. They include penalties in this as well. When you look at the penalties associated to this, if it's going to be a civil action, you're looking at a $5,000 fine. If it's criminal, you're looking at a $50,000 fine up to a $100,000 fine. And then you could also see up to 20 years imprisonment. Another really sneaky thing that's in this as well has to do with pretty much a red flag mechanism to the ATF. There's a section at the very bottom that talks about investigation. And what it says is that beginning with the effective date of the amendments made by this section, the Attorney General, through the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, shall investigate all reports that a person is improperly storing a firearm or ammunition. So this is pretty much just a red flag type of mechanism where someone could report you for improperly storing your firearms, not meeting those requirements of having it unloaded in a different location with a trigger lock, all of those things. They could report you, and then potentially the ATF could come, investigate, If they find you violated, then they could seize your firearms, maybe hit you with these fines, hit you with the imprisonment, things like that. So again, this bill is really nasty. It kind of tries to cover itself talking about safety of others, but really what it's about first is disarming you in your home so that you are pretty much defenseless, and then also adding a red flag mechanism to where the ATF can come into your home, investigate, and potentially seize your firearms and hit you with penalties. So we've talked about H.R. 125, we talked about H.R. 130, and even in my last video, we talked about H.R. 127, which has a ton of anti-gun and gun control proposals in it. A lot of the comments, especially in the last video, we're talking about, well, how are they going to enforce all this stuff? How are they going to know? Well, enter H.R. 121. H.R. 121 actually seeks to hire 200 new ATF agents specifically to investigate and enforce these types of laws. H.R. 121 is known as the Gun Violence Reduction Resources Act of 2021. What it says is that the Attorney General may hire 200 individuals to serve as agents and investigators for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, in addition to any individuals so serving as of the date of the enactment of this act. So that's how they're going to try to enforce all of these new bills that they're proposing, all these new laws that they potentially will pass. They're going to try to beef up the ATF, hire 200 new individuals specifically to investigate and enforce the laws that they are going to try to put on the books and these new gun control mechanisms that they're putting in place. So that's a breakdown of H.R. 130, H.R. 125, as well as H.R. 121. In my last video, I talked about H.R. 127. Like I said in that video, we need to be reaching out to our representatives, reaching out to the individuals that propose these bills as well, and let them know that we do not agree with these types of infringements on our Second Amendment rights, and that we will not support for them and we will not vote for them if they continue these attacks on our rights. I'll put a link down in the details section to all the things I talked about as well, and I'll try to find a link so you guys can actually find your representatives as well, so you can reach out to them. Also, if you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure you hit that notification bell, because that helps the channel analytics, helps us spread the word about the Second Amendment, and also spread the word about things like this that are going on in the US to infringe on our Second Amendment rights. So as always, thanks you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.